Memory transcription subject, Governor Tarva of the Venlo Republic. Date, Standardized Human Time, October 9, 2136. This should have been a jubilant moment. The UN Liberation Fleet established contact with the Venlo military and requested permission to dock on our home world. A victory against the Arxer was something I never fathomed. The humans had accomplished the impossible. But I didn't understand why the Secretary General had traveled all the way from Earth to meet with me. His stated purpose was to discuss something urgent with me before those ships landed. The way the human diplomats were tight-lipped and implored me to remain calm instilled some apprehension. My advisors were aware of the crocodile invasion. We offered to take in as many Terran refugees as needed. About 50,000 predators had arrived on the first flights and were settled into temporary housing. We didn't have the resources to take care of them long-term or to satisfy their dietary preferences. But leaving our friends to die wasn't an option, so we'd figure it out together. There was no need to persuade us to help, and the minutiae could be handled by stand-ins. As for the diplomatic fiasco, the humans sent representatives to every allied species yesterday. They would point the finger at the Kolshan Commonwealth and pray their innocence was believed. With such immediate casualties, all bets were off. I'd expect the Thafki to be most suspect of predators, given that they're almost extinct. The Fissans, with their expansive resources, are the ones we truly must convince, at all costs. There wasn't much to do besides await each race's reaction. I told the humans, in no uncertain terms, that I wouldn't expect any government's assistance. What else could the UN figurehead wish to discuss in person at such a crucial time in his planet's survival? If Meyer was leaving Earth, shouldn't his priority be appealing to Chow Sun or Tassa for aid? Noah, do you know what this is about? I asked. The Terran ambassador frowned. I think it's better to wait for Meyer, Tarva. I don't imagine you're going to like this. Please, just promise you'll try to understand, for me. The ominous reply didn't provide any reassurance. That was how humans spoke when they were worried something predatory would frighten us or shake our trust. I didn't like seeing my beloved friend pleading with me, like I was bound to turn against him. Don't be like that, I grumbled. What, are you finally going to tell me you hunt through your endurance? Noah gaped at me, eyes bulging. Who told you? I figured it out, watching you exercise back on Alpha. It occurred to me how that tirelessness might help chase down prey. You don't have much else going for you. Gee, thanks. You don't seem very concerned, though. Why should I be? Your people would never hunt mine, either way. I am humanity's friend, and I'm not here to judge your ancestors. The ambassador patted my shoulder with affection. I didn't appreciate that there was still secrecy around their hunting methods, but trust was a slow process. Fortunately, my deduction skills were sufficient. You are the only real friend we've had out here. Thank you, Noah whispered. I flicked my ears in acknowledgement. Not to inflate my own ego, but I'm pretty alright. So see, Secretary General Meyer doesn't need to waste time talking me off the ledge. That's not what I'm talking you down about, a gravelly voice interrupted. Noah and I both startled. Neither of us noticed the Secretary General enter the cavernous reception hall. I had no idea how long Meyer had been eavesdropping, but it was enough to catch the subject matter. I was glad I didn't make any suggestive quips about their endurance. The UN leader looked like he hadn't slept in days, as he tossed a hard-copy photograph on my desk. The poor guy collapsed into the nearest chair and pawed at his bleary eyes. I wanted to order him to get some rest, but with Earth in danger, I doubted he would comply. My gaze landed on the image, which showed a uniformed human sitting across from an Arxer. Was this taken from one of their ships? The gray had a shackle around its leg, so at least it was restrained from rampaging through the crew quarters. How the Terrans got it there in one piece was another question. We captured several Arxer from a cattle ship. Secretary General Meyer stifled a yawn and blinked in quick succession. Quite a few of our major players had, well, concerns about sharing the next part with you. Given that you're the only reason humanity is still alive, I felt you had the right to know. To know what? I asked, hesitantly. Meyer raised his hands in a placating gesture. Please don't take offense, I'm just repeating the story multiple Greys told us. They claim the Federation infected thousands with a microbe that made them allergic to meat, then killed their livestock to force them into herbivory. I narrowed my eyes, processing what the human relayed. Our Terran friends proved that being a predator alone didn't explain the Arxer's cruelty. Either sadism was a trait unique to their species, or a reaction to a particular event. On that note, the Federation had no issue sacrificing lives or bending morals, in the short time I knew the primates. I've watched them beat and starve a human. Blow up spaceships to eliminate any offer of friendship. Plan multiple raids to wipe out all life on Earth. Honestly, I wouldn't put that antagonism past the Federation. But if it's true, I know nothing about it, I replied. Regardless, why would the Arxer choose to farm sapient beings, rather than eat plants? Noah pursed his lips, suppressing a sigh. They're obligate carnivores, Tarva. They cannot survive without meat. I tilted my head in confusion. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Why not? Obligate carnivores can't digest plants like you or me. They don't have the right gut bacteria, and they can't synthesize vitamins from plant forms. There are certain nutrients, like taurine, that exist almost exclusively in meat, Meyer chimed in. Correct me if I'm wrong, Noah, but I think such carnivores have high protein requirements as well. The astronaut nodded. Exactly. The glucose in their blood, energy, comes from proteins rather than carbohydrates. In the absence of protein, their bodies start eating their own muscle and organs. I shuddered at the notion. Having your innards digested by your own cells was the literal definition of starvation. Human scientists needed to spread these facts around. It would make predation more sympathetic. Flesh-eating made sense if biology left no alternative. Noah couldn't eat any meat while he was at the Federation summit. No wonder he was irritable. I had no idea he was in such agony. Burgeoning concerns flooded my mind, and I stared at the ambassador in horror. We were informed from the onset that humans had higher protein requirements. Had the vegetarian visitors been suffering or starving to pacify us? I hoped none of them would have long-term repercussions. That was never my intention. Noah's brown eyes softened. What's wrong, Governor? Was that too graphic? You have been starving from eating plants? I squeaked. Meyer breathed a frustrated sigh. Humans are omnivores, Tarva, as we have told you many times. The nutrients in vegetables are quite accessible to us. That said, without animal products, we usually develop serious mineral deficiencies, Noah interjected, sensing my next question. Vegetarians need supplements or fortified foods, B12, iron, protein, and so on. This has been explained to your medical community. Undoubtedly, it was easier to absorb those nutrients through dietary means. At least the Terrans could survive on vegetation, with a little help. The Arxer couldn't derive any nutritional value from plants, even if they wanted to. I didn't know why zero scientists, here or in the Federation, had figured that out. So it's not about bloodlust at all. I get the point, I think, I sighed. What do you want to do about the Grey's story? Meyer grimaced. Governor, I'll give it to you straight. The Arxer offered us an alliance, and the Federation has forced us to hear them out. We need all the help we can get, especially from such a powerful player. I stared at the floor, and avoided Ambassador Noah's pitying gaze. This was the scenario every Venlil dreaded, from the moment humans declared their peaceful intent. Everyone feared they would buddy with the Arxer at the first opportunity. We hoped that these predators wouldn't be like the ones who saw us as tasty playthings. But the truth was, Terrans were nothing like the monsters we imagined. They sided with the Federation and mustered a genuine attempt at peace. General Jones told me a long time ago that humanity would do anything to protect Earth. I couldn't blame them for making that decision, forsaking our predicament for theirs. I blinked away tears. Do what you have to. I understand why you're leaving us. Their friendship is more impactful. Leaving? Meyer echoed. Wait, do you think we're just going to let them eat you? Noah stepped toward me, shaking his head for emphasis. We'd never abandon you. Never, understand? The Terran ambassador enveloped me in a warm hug, without waiting for a response. I sank into his suffocating grasp. Losing the humans would be a devastating emotional blow, especially this particular human. I didn't think I could bear it. The selfish part of me wanted them to stand against the Arxer, whatever the cost. The Secretary General cleared his throat pointedly. We consider you the same as our own people. Any deal with us mandates the release of all captive Venmal and an armistice between your governments. That is non-negotiable. What? You want us to ally with, or bargain with the Greys? I hissed. Something like that. Elias, I killed my only child because of their bombing excursions. I remember how it felt, to hold her in my arms as I told the doctors to disconnect life support. Forgive me if I'm not thrilled about the idea. The humans were considering a deal out of necessity, but the circumstances were different for our predator friends. Terrans hadn't been slaughtered en masse for centuries. That wasn't something you just forgot. Whatever the Federation had done, it didn't change the unspeakable atrocities committed against Venmalkind. You can't reason with creatures who bomb schools and laugh at brutalized pups. I don't want to talk to the Greys. I recognized that personal experience was clouding my judgment, but I didn't want to brush it aside. The Arxer ripped apart my life. Even my mate and I separated, because he reminded me too much of our daughter. The pain was still a constant ache in my heart. Suffice to say, I despised the Arxer with the utmost venom. I am sorry for your loss, Tarva. I know how hollow those words must sound. The wrinkles on Meyer's face were taut with sympathy. But please let me correct that statement, you did not kill her. You chose not to prolong her suffering, because you're a selfless, kind person. My tail drooped with grief. Thank you. Is that what you really think? I do. That's why I think you'll help us broker this deal. So nobody else on your world will have to endure that feeling ever again. And so that we might not have to bury our loved ones 7 days from now. The UN leader was a gifted speaker, I'd give him that. Was any price too high to bring peace to my planet? Even a brief reprieve would be merciful, if it halted the torment of millions. All the Venmal really wanted was for this senseless war to stop. Noah, how can we, no, how can you trust them? I asked, after a long silence. I don't, but there's no good alternatives. The ambassador crossed his sinewy arms. I'm disgusted by those fascist child eaters, but the Federation is the immediate threat to Earth. Meyer frowned. We're ideologically incompatible with the Arxer, long term. An alliance would be temporary, to buy time. Perhaps we can steer them down less reprehensible paths. I suppose the reptilians would be less of a menace under Terran control, pointed at our enemies. Still, how could we justify this to the non-hostile Federation majority? The largest voting bloc were the 107 that sought an anti-Arxer alliance with humanity. Those species would see a predatory partnership as violating the crux of their position. Are you guys trying to ensure I lose next year's election? I grumbled. I'll stand with you, but this won't look good. You might as well go on galactic television, and pledged to eat a Zerulean infant a day. Noah flashed his teeth. Well, the birds already think that's our morning breakfast. We're past worrying about appearances. Very well. Though, I hope you have a better plan than flying to a cattle world and offering me as a sacrifice. Meyer smirked. Actually, an Arxer captain gave us the location of one of their spy outposts. I'm going to fly within comms range and strike up a nice conversation. Care to join me, Tarva? The thought of seeking a carnivore's safe haven made my heart stop in my chest. There was nothing I would care for less than to be surrounded by abominations. The mental image of hungry eyes darting over my vital areas made me want to curl into a ball. What Venlil would ever want to talk those foul beasts? A low whine rattled off my vocal cords. I can't think of a worse idea, but I'm right behind you. Let's get going. Memory transcription subject, Governor Tarva of the Venlil Republic. Date, Standardized Human Time, October 10, 2136. Alarms blared from the cockpit, and my fur stood on end. Meyer's head snapped up from its snoozing position. The human needed only a fraction of a second to process the stimuli. The Secretary General jumped into full alert mode, scrambling toward the ship's helm. It was incredible how quickly the Predator brain kicked into fighting mode. Our transport was accompanied by a 10-ship UN escort, which was armed to the teeth. We planned on skirting the edge of FTL comms range and blasting a long-range transmission toward the Arxer station's coordinates. There shouldn't be a high chance of conflict, since we were keeping a substantial distance. Still, the humans came prepared to protect their leader. Status? Meyer asked, his voice icy calm. What's all this about? The Terran pilot grimaced. Massive formation on an intercept course, about 2 milliparsecs out. Looks like patrollers of an Arxer make. Hail them on all frequencies. Already done. No reply, sir, but our sensors picked up an attempted target lock. Abort mission. Adjust our course at once. Too late. We can't shift our heading quick enough in hyperspace. Shit, I don't belong anywhere near a conflict, I panicked. Why didn't the humans assume the station location was a trap? I guess desperation overrode their paranoia. It seemed the reptilians weren't as keen on talking as the captive ones posited. The fake promise of an alliance was exactly the sort of deception the Federation claimed was inherent. If the Arxer managed to subdue us, I might have to take drastic measures. I hoped I didn't pass out at the first sign of boarding. My head felt woozy, like I had been twirling around for hours. Meyer's eyes widened, and he caught me as I lurched forward. It was all I could do to coax the slightest motions out of my muscles, as the terror of becoming Arxer livestock intensified. The UN leader pushed me back into my seat and strapped me into the harness with steady hands. Please, Elias, ICC can't. Please kill me if they get on board, I pleaded. The Secretary General combed a hand through his gray hair. Nobody is going to die. We'll figure a way out. No, P promised to kill me if that time comes. My words tumbled out in hyperventilating gasps, and I caressed my searing heart. You have no idea what they'll do to me, especially when they figure out who I am. Please. I understand what you're saying. Everything is going to be fine, but I need you here with. A colossal jolt radiated through the ship's frame. Meyer doubled over, clutching his temples, profanity spewed from the human's mouth. That was quite the deviation from his typical composure. It felt wrong to see such a stalwart man roll onto his side and curl up into a fetal position. His cheeks had turned bright red, and his binocular eyes watered. Is Meyer okay? He looks like he is asphyxiating. I've never seen a human skin that color. The effects of the FTL disruptor pulse hit me a millisecond later. I felt my ears pop like I was in a plummeting elevator, and the discomfort only escalated. I whimpered in pain as I sensed the fluid sloshing in the auditory canals. The positive was it snapped me out of my fear, but the existing dizziness was compounded. My surroundings were an undulating haze. "Fucking hell," the Secretary General grunted. "Shields! Shields!" The Terran leader shifted onto his stomach and began to crawl toward the cockpit. He tapped his earlobe, still bothered by the ringing sensation. He then shook his head, as vigorously as a rain-drenched Venlil. I didn't think any human had been on the receiving end of a disruptor pulse before. This crew was the first to experience it. Our ship's pilot raised an unsteady arm. The disorienting effects inhibited his coordination, and he couldn't jab his finger on the right button. There was no concerned chatter from our escorts. Their bearings must be rattled too. The grays had rendered us defenseless. Silver streaks closed in on us from a diagonal heading. Orange light encompassed an escort vessel's hull as the Arxer swooped in. The reptiles seemed to be taunting us by drawing so close. More blinding beams accelerated around us and drilled into the UN craft from flawless angles. This was a beatdown, not a fight. I struggled through my own panting. "Elias, get a firearm and shoot me. Please, I beg you." A disgruntled Meyer struggled to his hind legs. His hair and attire were more disheveled than I ever recalled. The dignitary was painstaking with his grooming and persona. His reddened skin glistened with water, and dark stains spread under his arms. Human sweat had a way of making them look slimy and feral. Hail the Arxer again, but with a video preview. "Do it," the Secretary General barked. The helmsman stiffened. "Are you mad, sir? That's going to be a little difficult now." Our pilot slammed a fist on the control column, swerving away from a flock of mini-missiles. I'd guess those were designed to squeeze between chinks of armor or dodge interceptors. Our ship listed to one side, as several hits battered our underbelly. The navigator howled some curses. Meyer shook the other man's shoulder. "Open a channel. Do exactly what the fuck I said." "Yes, sir." The Secretary General placed his hands on the console, steadying himself as kinetics pelted our armor. Our allies were trying to intervene, but several were otherwise occupied. Meyer gritted his teeth and turned his eyes right toward the camera lens. An Arxer ship banked around us and pivoted to a head-on view of the cockpit. Its railguns glowed as it prepared to finish us off. My bloodstream was flooded with nauseating chemicals. These were the last moments of consciousness I would ever have. To my bewilderment, the enemy craft hesitated. Its weapons powered down, and it lost interest in our staring contest. The other Greys also backed off, leaving their Terran targets time to recuperate. They circled back to their jump point and watched us from the increased distance. "Greetings on behalf of the Arxer Dominion." The throaty voice on the speakers was accompanied by a visual of a menacing creature. The sight of its yellowed fangs was revolting. "Our sincere apologies, brothers. We do not mean you any harm." Meyer heaved a flustered sigh. "Why did you attack us? We hailed you as soon as we saw you. Your subspace trail originated from Venlil Prime, so we didn't realize it was you," the Predator croaked. "You were heading straight for a key foothold of ours. Listening to the prey beg is a waste of time. I'm sure you understand." It didn't escape my notice how the Secretary General's shoulders tensed. He inhaled a few purposeful breaths, as though trying to restrain his temper. I was aghast at the civility the Arxer was displaying to the humans. Nothing directed at us ever suggested this demeanor was within their capacity. Even as they are polite to the Terrans, they are bashing Venlil. They would never agree to a truce with us. "We were heading for your listening station," Meyer growled. "Humanity wishes to negotiate terms for our species' interactions, and we have some intelligence to offer." Its eyes narrowed to slits, inspecting the primate's form. "Speak." "I am listening." identify yourself. I'm Secretary General Elias Meyer, leader of the United Nations. Do you have the authority to negotiate on behalf of your species? Authority over this sector. I'm Chief Hunter Isif. This transmission is being recorded, so I will relay anything you say through the proper channels. My difficulty in collecting my thoughts was frustrating, but this was marked improvement from being fired upon. It was unsurprising to learn Arxer labeled their highest-ranking officers as chief hunters. Their society revolved around the systematic slaughter of other sapients. Did the humans really think they could change that? This was a foolish mistake on my part. The Venlil had no part in any of this, even if we were loyal to the Terrans. That will suffice, the Secretary General decided. Humanity thought you would be interested to learn 7 species that have relocated their military assets. In other words, their territory is practically unguarded. Isif's tongue flittered between its fangs, as it salivated at the prospect of a raid. The sinister gleam in those eyes was enough to make me question humanity's plan. How could my friends call such a malicious assault on the crocodile's head? Meyer knew precisely what would happen to the civilians on world. It was a low move, even with the stakes. Also, there are 17 other species who have mobilized a couple ship units, the human leader continued, without any sign of guilt. Perhaps that will weaken a few key regions, or result in their forces being spread thin. The first 7 names will be easiest, but it's your choice. The Arxer offered a scratchy chuckle. Send the data over, Meyer. I take it these assets have relocated to attack you. You wouldn't give information for free if it wasn't in your interest. It doesn't matter. But I do have a request in return. If you want to ally with us, you need only ask. The human leader paused. He turned around to face the cabin and waved for me to join him. I shook my head in the negative, not wanting the predator to see my presence. The entire dialogue was going to crumble the second my face appeared on screen. Meyer crossed his arms, tapping his foot with impatience. The stubborn human was going to wait until I joined him, one way or another. Blood roared in my ears as my shaking claws unclipped the harness. My legs felt like they were made of jelly. I slunk up beside the primate with my tail between my legs. The Secretary General's eyes glowed with defiance. He scooped me up by the chest and propped my paws around his neck. The reptile's maw hung agape for several seconds. The dilation of its eyes made my grip tighten. I imagined it was contemplating how I'd look on a carving station. Why is that feeble animal not cowering? Isif asked, at last. You have your food loose in your ship? My ears pinned against my head. Fuck you, scaly wretch. I hope you rot in a furnace. The Arxer leaned back and placed a spindly arm beneath its snout. I was surprised it didn't return the insult or lobby vulgar threats at my race. The way it flashed its teeth reminded me of the Terran's amused expression. Then again, perhaps it was the display of appetite that we used to interpret that as. Meyer sighed. Tarva, meet Isif. Isif, meet Tarva. Excellent, now everyone is acquainted. Its name is irrelevant. It is lesser. Explain yourself, quickly, human, the chief hunter snarled. Sure, that's easy. If you want positive relations with the UN, cease all hostilities with the Venlil Republic. The human bared his teeth in a confident smile. Also, release every Venlil in your custody. We will compensate you double the cattle's weight in fresh meat, so food is not an issue. You have some nerve. Why would we relinquish our right to such a delicacy? Why would this be the entire basis of your terms? The Venlil are our partners. You recognize the value of sowing division within the Federation and having sources with access to their information. You also know what a powerful ally we could be. Sparing one species isn't that important in the grand scheme of things. Isif cast a ferocious glare at me, but I managed to meet its gaze. The Arxer could not harm me through the screen. This could be my only chance to confront a monster, and I wanted it to know that Venlil were not just inferior creatures. My courage seemed to cement its decision. A growl rumbled in the soulless predator's throat. We heard you took Arxer captives during our unfortunate clash in Gojid space. Add them to your end, and we have an agreement, unless you killed them. In that case, there won't be any deals today. I accept those terms. For the record, we don't kill surrendering prisoners. It's not strategical, Meyer replied. We're glad to hear that. How do you wish to complete this transaction? Bring the captives, alive, to the abandoned Venlil colony I just sent you. We'll give you the code to a storage satellite once you've left the prisoners unharmed. The exchange will be arranged a month from now. That is acceptable. I blinked in amazement, unable to believe my ears. Had the Arxer hunter agreed to release all of our livestock that easily? My instinct suggested that it had to be deception. For all of Meyer's poised words, I couldn't fathom the benefit to the enemy. The logistics of reintegrating millions of traumatized Venlil and trying to explain that our greatest allies were warlike predators daunted me too. That was on top of the projected millions of Terran refugees we needed to find a place for. Perhaps the Greys agreed to release the cattle because they realized the burden it would place on our infrastructure. The humans' judgment will be sound. You can discuss this with their generals later, if they have the time. The Secretary General scowled at the camera. You try anything on the Venlil, we blow the satellite up. Also, we have a rough estimate of how many cattle you have, so don't try to cheat us. Isif snorted. Cheat you? I am extending my claw in friendship. But your request will take considerable effort, and it's inevitable that some mewling Venlil will slip through the cracks. I understand, Meyer muttered. Thanks for your time, Chief Hunter. I hope our information serves you well. Yes, the misplaced assets have been passed along. Why do you not just ask for our help stopping their attack? Because I have no guarantee you wouldn't just destroy your competitor. Destroy you? If we wanted that, you would already be dead. Something about the Arxer's tone sent a chill down my spine. That didn't sound like an empty threat. The reptile was certain that it could fulfill that goal if it desired. A predator's bluster wasn't usually so nonchalant and dismissive. Meyer raised his eyebrows. I beg your pardon. We squeezed Earth's location out of some cattle. The scholarly types. Learned a lot about your species, your violence, Isif chuckled. Don't misunderstand, I'm not saying this to threaten you. But that should prove we won't attack. I see. The human's complexion reverted to its ashen state, and concern flashed in his pupils. Why are you so interested in befriending us? You're the most exciting thing to happen to this galaxy in a long time. We searched for other true sapients for centuries. It's a shame the prey found you before us. The Secretary General stared at the screen, unable to formulate a response. The excitement at finding fellow predators clearly wasn't mutual. The last thing the humans needed was another genocidal enemy scoping out Earth. That made it much tougher for this partnership to be a temporary stopgap. Don't look so glum. I'm told the Federation tried to kill humanity in its nest. We are the same. That clingy rodent is more likely to harm you than us. Isif declared. My eyes narrowed. I have never lifted a claw against humans, Predator. You don't know me. The Arxer curled its lip. Oh, but I do, Dinner. You Federation hypocrites are all the same. Have a safe ride home, humans. I'll see you around. The video call ended, and Meyer helped me climb down from his back. The Secretary General looked shaken to his core. That final revelation wormed into his skull and escalated his concerns for his home. I hoped I hadn't aggravated the situation, but the way the reptilian spoke to me was maddening. That conversation hadn't inspired any optimism for Earth's future, at least, not in my book. It was dubious whether the Grey would fulfill its stated bargain as well. Whatever the humans desired from that engagement, I hoped they got it. Memory transcription subject, Captain Cal Sim, Crocodile Alliance Command. Date, Standardized Human Time, October 16, 2136. When deprived of sleep for days, the crew began to get a little jumpy. The Terran ambushes became more sporadic along the journey, but persisted all the same. The Crocodile fleet was left with no choice but to stay on constant alert. I focused on keeping the other officers rested, while I shouldered the brunt of the shifts. My personnel became run down despite the adjustment. It was severe enough that I ordered Zarn to give essential crew members stimulants. The drugs left me wired enough that my wing wouldn't stop twitching, which was a nuisance. But with our arrival slated for today, the soldiers couldn't afford to be drowsy. Sharp wits were a necessity to clash with humans. Perhaps that was the purpose of the ambushes all along. Yet another disruptor pulse had shaken us up on the outskirts of the Sol system. The jarring effects were becoming routine, as we all tried to clear the fog from our minds. My eyes felt like a masoch was sitting on them, but I forced them to stay open. The predators wouldn't break us on my watch, not on the cusp of our destination. My gaze shifted to the viewport. XO, status report. I'm detecting sensor anomalies. The humans may be somewhere nearby, but it's tough to tell. Thion proved a godsend with his analytical mind. His skill set complemented my tactical understanding. We're already in the system's outer orbit. This is their last chance to strike. The sensor readout revealed that we were less than a milliparsec from Earth. We anticipated the bulk of the Terran armada was waiting within Sol's inner reaches. I had no doubt the humans set up FTL interference throughout their system, so there would be no further hyperspace hops. The rest of the journey could be handled sublight. Our instruments picked up millions of planetesimals, which were mainly composed of ice. The circumstellar disk was a sprawling collection, which Federation scientists had noted as one of two debris planes. Our fleet filtered out all water-dominant objects, so they wouldn't drown out enemy movement. Where are the humans? If this is the border of their territory, you think they'd send someone to greet us. Is there anything to be concerned about with this location? Any weapons hidden in the belt? I squawked. The first officer cleared his throat. The objects are spread too far apart to pose a threat, sir, as visual indicates. I detect no mining activity or research stations. There has to be something unusual, I pressed. Humans don't just pick their spots at random. All I notice is that they just powered down the FTL disruptors. Perhaps their primitive defenses are malfunctioning? We could shave a few hours from our travel time, if we can get in one more jump. Suspicion filtered through my tired brain, and I urged myself to consider the circumstances. It seemed unlikely that all of humanity's defenses would collapse at the same time. The only reason they would halt the signal would be to allow their own ships through. But there were no unknown drive signatures on sensors. We should see any predators coming with ease. As if to mock my certainty, a massive chunk of ice blinked into existence amidst crocodile ranks. It plowed into the heart of our formation, dwarfing the ships it steamrolled over. Panicked chatter barked over the radio, and our Federation allies scrambled to expend an orbital bomb on the object. We managed to crack the first planetesimal, but dozens more surfaced on several headings. My talons undid the sensor's filter, and hundreds of warp blips emerged on my screen. The predators predicted that we would filter out anything icy, which rendered their strike invisible to our instruments. I could appreciate the deviousness of their ploy. Human creativity was leaps and bounds beyond the Arxer. I leaned over the comms panel. All Federation vessels, deploy your FTL disruptors now. The subspace indicators vanished, as enough of our allies complied with my order. Still, Dozens of hijacked planetoids, 20 times the diameter of our craft, were enough to cause a headache. We needed to take evasive maneuvers if any were on trajectory for our position. Jayla puffed out her chest with excitement. And so it begins. I want to be the one to push the button when we burn their cities. There was no time to worry about her derangement. It didn't matter if she was the one dropping the payload, or if I handled it myself. As the one giving the orders, the burden of responsibility fell on me. I knew what a terrible deed we were about to commit. The mental images gnawed at my conscience. At least the creatures from past exterminations had no foreknowledge of their demise. I wondered how many humans' last thoughts would be of their families. Those unsightly hunters had more in common with us than most crocodile would like to admit. Their desperation to survive and their collectivism resonated with our own. It is truly a shame that predators are prone to destruction and violence. There is only room for one of us in the galaxy, I reminded myself. This crew is sacrificing something of ourselves so that the Federation has a chance to survive. Nonetheless, I respected how the hominids utilized every asset at their disposal. Dozens of crocodile warships lay crushed or totaled around us. The Terrans never had to rear their ugly heads. One icy object was barreling toward our location, despite the pitiful attempts to obliterate it. The asteroid's magnitude left no doubts that our hull would implode if it connected. The damn inbred strapped a warp drive to a space rock. Who the fuck does that? Or even thinks to do that? Thion spat. I hummed in thought. Someone who sees anything as a potential weapon. A predator much more dangerous than the Arxer. The Farsal gritted his teeth. Glad you've seen the light, Captain. I've always seen the light. Now quit with your snide remarks, and find us a way out of this mess. Thion jerked his floppy ears in disdain, before issuing new orders to navigations. The asteroid was propelled forward by its existing momentum. It was near enough that I could glimpse the imperfections on its surface. Distant sunlight glinted off the watery composite and washed it in a serene, ultraviolet hue. That color would look a lot less beautiful smashed up against our plating. Our vessel executed a sharp turn and rerouted power to acceleration. The state-of-the-art warship didn't seem to cover the space fast enough. It felt like a predator was nipping at our talons. My stomach somersaulted as the projectile scraped by nearly atop us. We cleared the collision course with mere seconds to spare. The humans might have hoped to incite panic so that they could cow us through our instincts. We had to remember that the stakes were our entire civilization, our right to roam the galaxy in freedom and dignity. Quelling my nerves, I contemplated which weaponry could take the icy mass out. Careful placement of explosives should still conserve firepower for the main event. Movement flashed in the viewport's corner, a streaking blur of metal. My weary brain took a full second to process the new data. An Allied vessel was gunning straight toward us. A head-on collision wasn't something either of us would survive. But the fools were preoccupied dodging their own asteroid and seemed oblivious to our presence. Move the blasted ship! I screeched. Can you not see we're going to crash? The navigations officer curled his neck with trepidation as he frantically brought our nose upward. There was a brief scraping sound from the friendly brushing our underbelly. The artificial gravity failed to compensate for another abrupt change. A forceful tug sucked us toward the rear of the bridge, and I lost my balance on my perch. My wings fluttered frantically. There wasn't enough time to gain proper lift, but I wanted to slow my fall. The air beneath my cyan feathers allowed me to drift, and I glided down the slanted gravity well. Other crocodile also used shared instincts to cushion their fall. Thion wasn't as fortunate. Flight didn't exactly grace his tubby form. The Farsal's stout paws offered little traction, and his curved hind legs made his bipedal stance precarious in the best circumstances. His jowls quivered with fear as he tumbled backward. There was a sickening crack from his head slamming against the support wall. Thyon. XO, you will answer when I speak to you. Give me some sign that you're all right, I hollered. The first officer didn't respond. He was crumpled in a limp heap, with a concerning amount of blood pooling around him. What if the poor guy was dead? Regardless of his attitude, the last thing I wanted was to send him home in a body bag. Jayla clicked her beak together in delight, and I shot her a warning look. She was elated that my second was knocked out of commission, since it cleared the return of her old post. It was bothersome that a person could derive pleasure from another's misfortune, but I suppose it was no different than Zarn relishing human suffering. Soldiers like them could perform their duties without remorse, at least. Focus on the battle, I chided myself. You cannot get distracted and let the humans surprise you again. Honor Thyon's wishes. The gravity adjustment kicked in at last, and my crew members scrambled back to their posts. The navigations officer rushed to level our heading. We were fortunate to escape with our frame intact, and only a few dozen allies taken out. The most imaginative strategist wouldn't have accounted for asteroids warping out of nowhere. I glided over to the downed first officer, containing any untoward displays of grief. His russet fur was matted with blood, and he was unresponsive to poking. My talons locked around his hind ankle, digging into the pulse point. Relief coursed through my veins, as I felt a faint heartbeat. Dr. Zarn. I sent a transmission to the medical bay, praying that the spiteful Takkan had any healing aptitude. My security team is transporting the first officer to your lab. Serious head trauma, internal bleeding. Understood. I'll attend to the necessary preparations, Captain, Zarn replied. The security personnel carted the unconscious Farsal away, and I suppressed my concern. With neural trauma, the officer might be looking at permanent damage even if he was stabilized. There was no telling what time frame to expect for Thyon's recovery, but I doubted he'd be back within the mission span. It hadn't been within my forecast to lose anyone this early in the mission. My attention reluctantly returned to the battlefield, where the Federation fleet was trying to regroup. Dormant Terran ships crept out from behind planetoids and descended on any stragglers who strayed too far from the group. The chaos of the asteroids had broken our tight formation. Numbers were our primary advantage. We would be fine as long as we stuck together. They cannot stop all of us, or even a majority. Jayla ordered a sizable contingent of our fleet to charge at the Terran raiders, to deter them from pressing their luck. I blinked in irritation, as she claimed that the command was authorized by me. Lying was not a quality I appreciated, especially when it was done to get her way quickly. Then again, perhaps it was better to let her make the time-sensitive decisions. Burn any humans that try to run. We have to kill every one of them. Jayla shrieked. The atmosphere was solemn, as her phraseology was a bit too honest. She projected a certain vindictiveness that needed to be tempered down. This mission couldn't be about inflicting suffering or killing for killing's sake. That was not why I wanted my crew to think we were doing this. I tucked my wings behind my back. Don't let a single predator go, if you can stop it. The more humans that escape, the greater the chance they retain a viable population. Why is that such a bad thing, sir? An engineering assistant asked. There's two futures, son, the one where we survive, and the one where they do. When cancer metastasizes, it infects and consumes all healthy tissue nearby, I answered. Is that what you want for the galaxy? Consider this an early detection, before it spreads to our heart. A group of Terran fighters were blazing away, after punching at our weakest links. To my relief, my crew locked onto a pair of targets and chased them with plasma. Crocodile warships converged on the cluster like locusts. They sent those fearless hunters running off like Venlo. The humans were surprisingly slippery, finding an escape route with minimal casualties. Their ships evaded with vaulting maneuvers, and a plethora of defensive countermeasures were built into their hardware. For all my knowledge of predators, I hadn't expected these ones to be so adept at fleeing. This was a positive sign, if they had so little courage. My eyes landed on the faint blue dot on the horizon, which the predatory opportunists were retreating toward. Humanity was poised to make their last stand. The poor saps would perish without any reason to be missed. We were close enough to Earth to detect thousands of ship contacts, fanned out as a protective ward. A smarter species would have used those vessels to flee, if they knew of our arrival. That territorial nature does have its downsides. They'd rather fight and die, just like we predicted. The first wave of Terran defenses were beaten, and I suspected that was the toughest stage of transit. That asteroid trick would only work once. We had a clean shot to the Predator's home. Now, that small fleet was all that stood between us and orbital supremacy. We were so close to eliminating the menace that was humanity.